My friend said, don't bang into the books. So I banged into the books. Thank you, Lorraine. It's always a surprise when I find myself in front of an audience with this issue, because it was a surprise that I actually am here. Because when I was 11 years old, when I was playing pee-wee hockey and was a member of Boy Scouts, I was also suicidal. And I thought every night about killing myself. I prayed to God, to change me, but that clearly wasn't going to happen. And so I had moved from thinking about killing myself to actually planning it. And I knew my father was a hunter. I knew where the guns were, but that would be messy. And I knew there were pills in the medicine cabinet, but I didn't know which ones to take. And so one day when I was coming home from school, a cold November Nova Scotia day, these were the thoughts as I entered the house. And when I closed the door behind me, I come from a big, noisy family. The house was quiet, which surprised me. And then I heard sobbing. In the living room was my mother. She was under a blanket on the couch. Fire was blazing. She had a book in her hand and she was crying. And I ran to her, and she told me that the passage she was reading was one in which soldiers were throwing babies into the air and shooting them. Jewish babies. I'd never heard such a thing before. And she told me about Hitler and the Jews and the Holocaust. And I wondered why the Jews didn't hide. Because I knew all about hiding. I knew a wrong look or a wrong piece of clothing or a wrong word would get me into great trouble. I knew that people would be only too happy to turn people in, as they seem to be in Germany and Europe with the Jews. And so this is what I was thinking. Why didn't they hide? And then a thought came to my mind, and I thought, if the Germans were that wrong about the Jews, then maybe society, everyone, was that wrong about me. And that was a huge revelation, and at that moment, my desire for suicide had ended. And that was really the beginning of my reading life as well. I read everything I could find on the Holocaust, and it was quite an education. Promo Levi and Elie Wiesel told me that the yellow triangle was not the only designation for undesirables. The brown triangle was for Roma, the gypsies. The red triangle was for liberals, political prisoners. And the pink triangle was for people like me, homosexuals. Another part of my Holocaust education was the discovery that the first thing Hitler went after was books. It wasn't people. And that shaped me. Many years later in Toronto, I'd moved here from Nova Scotia. I'd landed my first job at Oxford University Press. And I joined a group in Toronto called the Canadian Committee Against Customs Censorship, because the state, both the local and the federal level, were attacking the bookstores and trying to shut them down as far as I was concerned, censoring the books. And the books they grabbed were everything from porn to books by Oscar Wilde. Safer sex information wasn't even safe from the censors. And in the midst of this, of course, then the censorship spread. It spread from the gay bookstores to the feminist bookstores to the leftist bookstores to the general bookstores. Then the police raided Glad Day, gay bookstore in Toronto, and charged them with obscenity over a lesbian magazine called Bad Attitude. Then they raided an art gallery and they wanted to burn the paintings. In the midst of this, at Oxford University Press, my employer, they decided that they were going to censor a book. Gay Ideas was a book of political philosophy, which included photographs by Robert Mapplethorpe. And Oxford was afraid that the book would be seized at the border and they'd be embarrassed. And so I resigned in protest. And I thought my career was over. But as it turned out, It was just the beginning. Thank you.